Hey everybody, CVH here with a deck tech. Today we're going to be going over a deck that I played on stream. Actually, it's been kind of a while since I did a deck tech on the channel. Just realized that. Sorry about that. Hopefully I can get more up shortly. But today we'll be going over this deck up here that I played to Legend number 8 from around Legend 50. It was just sort of a conceptual type of test thing. Sometimes I do that. Since the new patch hit and changed a bunch of cards, I titled it Tempo question mark because I wasn't really sure what to call it, wasn't really sure if it's good. If you know me, you know I don't really like calling decks tempo because they typically just act like aggro decks, and I think every deck, including control and ramp, you know, they just thrive on good tempo plays. Like Manacor is a good tempo play. So this is mostly an aggressive deck, but it didn't really have like the density of threats that I would call mid-range. So without further ado, let's take a look at it. It's like a slower version of the aggro battle mages going around with more emphasis on like value. My main idea with this deck was to take advantage of a bunch of ramp scouts that people said they were playing on the ladder, and even some control mage, and I was kind of worried about its aggro matchup specifically. It actually went, if I remember correctly, 12-3, so that's, you know, kind of insane for high legend, 80%. Played a couple of games with other decks and lost a couple ranks. Lost to this. I lost with I lost against a control deck, a mid-range deck. Just, you know, generally, you know, when your opponent draws really well. Didn't actually suffer too much against straight up aggro. In fact, this deck had a lot of game against it for a deck without a lot of heal. It does have a fair amount of prophecy. So let's go through the card choices. 3 sharpshooter scouts. Included these over Relentless Raider because we're not really a super aggro deck, and over like maybe a more value pick like a Crown Quartermaster, just because I thought this would help fight against the aggro, both as a prophecy and because it does have a lot of really good targets in the current meta. A lot of these aggro decks are playing Relentless Raider, they're playing Afflicted Elite, playing some Greystone Ravagers, so this card is live a lot of the time. 2 Steel Scimitars, had 3, just a good card to get you guys, you know, to trade favorably. Has some pretty good combos with the deck, you know, just some extra damage. I think it's a generally good card, worth it in here. 3 Dark Rifts, I figured I might as well play this even though I'm not playing Gladiator's Arena, which is a popular card in the super aggro Prophecy Battle Mage, because I'm not really relying on these to finish my opponents off. This is sort of like for the all-in aggro plan, and I can't really take advantage of this card as much since I run significantly fewer Prophecies. But Dark Rift, a really strong card against those control decks, because if they don't remove it, well, even if they do remove it, it's dealing some damage, and that's fine. But if they don't remove it, they're going to have a 7/5 with Ward to deal with, and that'll often just close the game out. So the only thing I was worried about this card was if it was possibly even going to be dead in like against those Prophecy Battle Mages, the faster versions. But, you know, even then, that deck is hard-pressed to come up with an answer. So if you can stay toe-to-toe on board, and they'll be wasting some time playing these supports as well, it can be very rewarding. So I like the card. Mage Slayer, good against those controlled mages, specifically just a solid 2-drop. This it doesn't seem like Battlemage has too many solid 2-drops, so I think this one is probably the best. Especially for what I was trying to counter. Crocodile, Harpy, both great, both good prophecies. Crocodile is seeing a lot more play because people are just really getting to valuing prophecies a lot. And, you know, it's at worst it deals some damage early for this deck, which is, you know, the deck wants to get ahead on damage for its Triumphant Jarls and its Burn and Pillages, and it does that. It also acts as some extra damage from a prophecy or helps you trade, so that's totally fine. 3 Daggerfall Mage, very value, 3-drop. All my 3-drops basically are just, you know, value slots. So we have a ton of them. We have the Gatekeeper, which just recently got Prophecy, so that can be used offensively and defensively. Fantastic for the deck. Daggerfall Maze can get you those tomes and those slower matchups. It's a ton of value when you're trading with something that has 2 health, such as any of our 2-drops. If you get a Daggerfall to just trade with the ward, it's just amazing. Skaven, amazing against those aggro decks. Seriously, probably need this card. It kills Slaughterfish, kills a ton of things. Can also help you, along with the Sharpshooter Scouts, to pop your own Breton Conjurers in a matchup where they might be playing Murkwater Witch, so you can like save Conjure for like Conjurer Skaven if that happens to be your most efficient play. It's really not that bad. It sounds pretty bad, but it's really not that bad. Withered Hand Cultist, just amazing against those control decks. That was one of the ways I wanted to take this deck. Since I only play the 3 Lightning Bolts and the 2 Burn and Pillage for actions, you could definitely play a lot more actions in this deck if you wanted to play like Cast Outs and Fire Bolts. Like, all these cards are fine, but I decided I'd rather take the deck in a Withered Hand Cultist direction because it's very good against Control Mage, and if people are playing Action Assassin or whatever, just a really good card. One of the most powerful. I just wanted to play something involving this card, and to sort of make up for the fact that we don't have cards like Firebolt, I do play 2 Ash Servant. Really wanted to play this card and test it for a while. Figured now that House Kinsman gets one-shotted by it, it's probably worth a test, and it was very good. I have to say, this card did a lot of work. I got really excited and played it too soon in one matchup, but, you know, if I had waited and saved it for an even better Ash Servant, I think I might have won one of the matchups that I lost. But yeah, this card, I think as a 2-of, was pretty solid. Just a 2-2 split on those and the Bretons, because they're like, I don't know, pretty good in different matchups, I figured, but, you know, in reality, they're both just solid cards that you don't want all the time in your hand. Don't exactly know if this deck's perfect yet, but both these cards perform very well. Breton Conjure, a little bit scary against the Ramp Scout. which is why I'm only running 2 because I figured I'd play against more than I did. But yeah, just a good card against those aggro decks. This is really what you want to stabilize if you have the time to play it and can trade it in. One of the games I lost was up against, I played against, it was like a Cut Purse and a 3-1 on one side of the board. I played Breton Conjurer, and he moved them both out of the way with Shadow Shift and Dune Smuggler the following turn. But if this card was able to, actually proc and summon a 5/5 guard, those games can just be instantly won by a Breton that's, on time and is allowed to resolve. Earthbone Spinner, fantastic. Silence, best that we can play, so we play it. Don't really want to talk about that too much, just a really good card. Bolt, same basic thing, really good card. Blood Dragon, best objective 5-drop. We don't really have too many ways to take advantage of Markath Bannerman in this deck. Obviously that's another fine 5-drop, so I just played Blood Dragon for value, because sometimes I can trade, bypasses guard, and most importantly, doesn't get hit by Lightning Bolt. Burn and Pillage, best sweeper in the game in my opinion, just super good. We'll be doing a card review analyzing this basically soon, so we can talk about it some more in depth. But if you guys aren't familiar with how good Burn and Pillage is, super good. Just realized I'm blocking the cards. Hopefully you know what these do. Yep, Burn and Pillage, super good. Triumphant Jarl, our main source of draw. Since this deck is going later than the aggro Battlemage, I wanted to have a way to cycle in this deck, and Jarl's obviously fantastic if you're ahead in life at all. This closed out many games when I was playing on the ladder against any of those slower decks. Not usually live against other aggro decks, but I mean, if you get to stabilize, if you're going to win the game, you have to stabilize early, and even then, you might be able to Jarl when you get to 6. It's just usually not correct against aggro, but against anything slower, other mid-range / tempo decks that are not quite aggro, and any control deck, obviously, Jarl's going to be fantastic. 2 Belligerent Giant, just a pretty huge tempo swing to close out the game. I guess this is why I called it tempo. Like, it's not necessarily a great threat by itself, because it dies to a lot of things before you can attack with it. A lot of the time you have to put it in Shadow Lane to protect against Cliff Racer, and it'll still die to Lightning Bolts against a lot of decks. But the effect is really powerful if they just wasted their turn playing something like a Night Shadow to stabilize, or especially Nahagleave is like the absolute best target. And sometimes you can pop a support if it's a relevant support. Usually you're just bouncing a creature and trying to pressure them into like dying in 2 turns or going for lethal yourself. And the last card is a Volendrung, another card. I don't think this card is like magically more playable because it has Breakthrough, even though I did win a game because of the Breakthrough. I just figured like it's just such a narrow card. Like aggro decks don't really want to play it because it's a 8 cost and there's not really a red control deck and it wouldn't even really be good in there because why do you need to buff something? But the buff is static and can win you the game, and if this card sticks, Admiral was telling me this a long time ago, like all of a sudden they have to kill everything you play because you can just buff whatever as soon as you're attacking with it. So I figured if there was a deck that wanted to like can end its curve at Volendrung, this would probably be the deck. Performed pretty well, directly won me 2 games out of however many. Didn't draw it a lot, obviously it's a 1-of, the only 1-of in the deck, so it's just sort of there because it's like a powerful effect that I think this deck can benefit from. Don't really know how much more in depth we can go about this card because, at its core it's a very simple card, but I think if there's a place for this card, it'll be in this deck. If you don't have it, I wouldn't really stress out about like replacing it. Obviously like a ton of things could go in the slot. Haven't really thought about that off the top of my head, but 3rd Burn and Pillage maybe. I don't think a 3rd Giant would be great, but like a Gratwood or something else early, it's just totally fine. But Volendrung, I think if you have it, you might be surprised if you give it a shot. So that's the deck, performed very well. I could go over really quickly and see what exactly the matchups looked like. That would be interesting. I don't exactly remember what I lost to, except there was one Archer. The Monk was what moved everything out of the way, so I lost 1 to a mid-range Monk, 1 to a mid-range Archer, and I think the last one was a control deck. Yeah, it was Spellsword Control. Yeah, and that was a mage game. So I lost a Spellsword Control, mid-range Monk, and down here mid-range Archer. I wouldn't say it's weak to other mid-range decks. I would just say, a lot of that comes into who's going to draw better. And if they curve out on you and you don't, you're probably unfavored. So losing 2 matchups like that I think is perfectly fair. The control deck had a lot of early pressure, and then was able to Tribune for quite a lot. And you're going to lose those 2 if you don't have a really aggressive start. But on the whole, I think this deck is very favored against control decks, especially Control Mage. So I suggest you give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Hopefully you enjoyed this rather unique take on Battlemage. It's like a straightforward deck, but it's pretty unique since you see like a lot of the aggros and a lot of the combos. So hopefully you enjoyed. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching this on Between the Lanes, check out the YouTube channel for more strategy videos. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, subscribe and check out betweenthelAnes.net for more strategy content on the site. Meta Snapshot coming later this month, number 3. And I'll see you next time, guys.